So we learned about the event loop in the previous video. In this video I will start with a new topic, which is promises in JavaScript. If you want to learn more on callbacks, I have a separate playlist on asynchronous JavaScript where I've discussed about callbacks and also the callback hell and how to get rid of it using promises and async await. The link for the playlist can be found on the I button at the top right corner. Now let me show you how promises can make your life easy while handling asynchronous code. Now with callbacks, the code is really hard to understand and comprehend at times. When you have multiple callbacks nested within each other, the situation is called as callback hell. And to get rid of it, we can use the promise API of JavaScript. With promises, the code seems easier to read and understand and even easier to test and maintain. Again, I would highly recommend you to check out that video on demystifying async await, where we have discussed the transition from callbacks to promises and then to async await in greater depth. So let me show you an example. So what I now want to do is I want to arrange items on a plate. So with that, I will demonstrate the concept of asynchronous programming using promises. So I will say const arrange items on plate. So that is an arrow function, and that will take plate, and I will set a default argument. So I'll set that to an empty object if nothing is passed to the function. Otherwise we will have the plate with us. So this is an arrow function. So I will say return new promise. So this promise constructor function takes two arguments, resolve and reject, and then we will set a code block. Now it takes a function as an argument which will get executed right away by JavaScript when this promise gets constructed. When you call new promise using the constructor function, so we can say return new promise, and then the function that takes in two other functions as arguments in that function. So we have resolve and reject as arguments to our arrow function that we have defined here. Now what I now want to do is, now if our plate contains water, okay, so if our plate does contain water, then we want to reject that promise. So I will say object.keys, and I will take out the keys of my plate object, and I will check whether it contains the key water. If it does contain a key water, then what we can do is we can say reject. So I will reject the promise, and I will say, okay, so don't have water with the plate. If you want to have water, always have it before a meal. Okay, so our plate should not include water. If it does include water, then I want to reject the promise. So what reject does here is that it marks the promise as failed. That is, there was some error, and hence we reject that promise that we made. So our error in this case is that if the plate object or our plate contains water as the key, then we want to reject it. We don't want water on our plate. So that is, there is some error, and hence we rejected the promise that we made. This rejection will be handled, as you will see how we can do so later in the video. So now what I will do is I will set up a timer. So we have already seen the concept of timer in our event loop video. So a timer, after 2 seconds I will trigger or call the function resolve and pass on the plate as the argument to our resolve function. So only when our plate doesn't contain water, we will run the set timeout, and the set timeout after the timer is done will resolve the plate. Okay, now with invocation to resolve, we can see that the async operation went well and we got the results. So that means the promise got resolved, otherwise it will get rejected. So here we are simulating the delay using the set timeout to mock an async call. So we are mocking an async call using the set timeout to produce a delay, and then resolving with the plate that we have. So let us invoke the arrange items on plate. Console.log arrange items on plate, and I'm not going to pass anything here. Okay, so for now I'm not passing any arguments. So let us see the output in the browser console. So you can see we are getting a promise. So now on triggering the arrange items on plate, then that returns us a promise on which we can tag .then and .catch to handle the cases for promise resolution and rejection respectively. So whatever callback you pass to the then method will get executed. So let me show you this. So if I say arrange items on plate and then tag on .then, so whatever data we get back here, I will log the data to the console. And if there is a failure, that is, so whatever callback you're passing to the .then block, so your then block, you're passing a callback function that receives data, and then you're logging the data to the console. And when the promise resolves, so whatever result you are getting back, you're logging that to the console. And if the promise gets rejected, the callback that is present within the catch block, so here we'll define a callback and we'll say error, and then we will log the error to the console. So if the promise got rejected, then the catch block will run, the callback within the catch block will get triggered, and you will log the error to the console. So let us see the output in the browser. Okay, so we are getting empty object, okay, because on triggering the promise, when we invoke the promise, we didn't pass any object pertaining to a plate. Then it is in pending state. Now once it is resolved, then we will get the data and we'll log the data to the console. And if it gets rejected, then you will log the error to the console. So this is how it works. So from pending, it will either go to completion or it will go to rejection. Okay. So let us move on. Let us pass an argument to our arrange items on plate function because it expects an argument. And if you don't pass one, it takes an empty object as the argument. So arrange items on plate. So on my plate, I want one tomato. So I'll pass that tomato as 1. And then we will get the plate. So once this promise goes from pending to resolved, so once you get the plate, you will log the plate to the console.log plate. Now to chain multiple promises, what I can do is return another invocation to arrange item on plate, and this will return a promise. So let me show you this. I want to tack on multiple .thens and I want to handle multiple promises. So I can say return an invocation to arrange items on plate, and here I can pass an argument as say pepper as 1, and here I'm returning another promise at line number 36. So now what I will do is I can tack on a .then to get the results for this promise that we are now returning. So once the promise gets resolved, then you will tack on a .then and you will get the plate, not place, plate, console log plate. Or if you are not able to get the plate, some error occurred, then you have the catch block. So here you can say catch error, console.log error. So now whatever data that you get from the return promise above, so you will get some data back from the return promise here as an argument to another .then that is tagged on to the previous .then. You are logging that to the console. You will get that in this .then, and then you can work with it like this. Now one key point to take away is that you can return data of any type, okay, not just a promise. You can return a string, you can return anything, and whatever you return from this .then will basically get passed as an argument to the .then tagged on with this .then. So whatever data of any type here you are returning, that will be wrapped in a promise. Now let us return one more promise from this .then. So I will say return and arrange items on plate. So I'm preparing a new plate and I will say pepper as 1 and tomato as 1. So setting 1 unit for each. Now I will again get one more plate here. So I will tack on a dot then. Okay, so and you will again get a plate that you can log to the console. Now let us try to arrange items on plate, and now I will pass water as an item on the plate, and this should reject. Okay, so see the output in the console. Let us go back to the browser to see the output. So we get tomato in our very first plate, then pepper in the second plate, then pepper and tomato in the third plate, and we have the error now, don't have water with the plate. If you want to have water, always have it before a meal. Okay, so this is how promises work in a promise chain. So since we had water in our plate here, and this code got triggered because the keys of the object does include water as the key, and that is why this code ran. So it gave a rejection, and once you get a rejection, the catch block will get triggered and you will log the error to the console. So you can see that we are doing execution of our code, which is asynchronous in nature, step by step. At the very first step you run some code, and once that is done you move on to the next step. And if at any line we have some failure, the callback pertaining to the catch block will get triggered. So we'll add the catch block right at the end of the chain, as you can see here. Now for handling errors that get produced anywhere in the promise chain, it is highly recommended to have a catch block right in the end of the promise chain. If any of the promises reject, the code block defined within the catch block will run, as you can see here. So if you want to cancel the promise chain, the catch block should be placed at the end of the promise chain. Now lastly, we have a finally block as well, so let us learn about it. Now when you have another then block, say after a catch block, so suppose you have a then block after this catch block. Okay, so once you have one more then block after this catch block in your promise chains, which means that a catch block is in middle of your promise chain, or say a dot then after dot then, which you can see here. So we are having a then, and then we have tacked on another then with this then here what will happen is that promise will re-enter the pending state. So once your promise is in pending state, when it gets resolved, so you get the data, then again it will go in pending state, and this is how it works. So keep in mind that the then and catch block will always return a new promise. So when you trigger a then, you are returning a new promise, and when you trigger a catch, you are again returning a new promise. So either they are not resolving to anything, or they are resolving to a plate, like in this case, or you're resolving to what you return inside of then. So here you are returning this, and if it does get resolved to some valid thing, which is an object of plate, then you are done. But if you're returning something or you're not returning something, then you will get undefined. Okay, but then this then block will definitely run. So only if there are no more then blocks left, it changes its state from pending to settled. Now once the promise gets settled, you can use a special block called as the finally block to do some cleanup task or deallocation of your resources that you had allocated prior to the promise chain. So let me show you how we can do this. So I can say finally after the catch block, and here I can define another arrow function, and I can say finally all the plates are ready to be displayed. So let us go back to the browser to see the output. So we are getting the first plate, then the second plate, then the third one, then you got the error, and even after the error the finally block did run. So you get finally all the plates are ready to be displayed. So you can see that finally block can be used to do some cleanup, or here we are just logging. You can do deallocation of resources that you had allocated prior to the promise chain, and now you want to release the memory that was taken by those resources if they are no longer required. The finally block will always run no matter your promise chain produce an error or not, if it is tagged on to the promise chain. Like this. It is the last thing that will always get executed if present. So this was all about the video on promises. If you want to learn more about promises or asynchronous JavaScript, I do have a complete playlist for that. The link can be found down below. So if you like the video, do give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and let's catch up in the next video.